Morning, y'all. Hope your weekend was nice and fun and you enjoyed the weather. I certainly did. It was awesome. Uh, so, Joe Biden is now the president-elect of the United States of America. Donald Trump will not be our president anymore after January, and it's possible that the Democrats are able to flip the Senate. There's those two runoff elections for Senate in the state of Georgia. And if they do go to a runoff election in December and the Democrats win, then they will have control over the government. They'll have Congress, Senate, and the presidency. So the Democrats will be in control of all three houses or all three branches of the legislative. They would control the legislative and the legislative branch and the executive branch. There we go. I got there. It just took me a little bit. And that would mean that Republicans wouldn't be able to stop Democratic mandates, Democratic policies. They wouldn't have a way to resist them, really, except for minorities. So anyways, we'll stop talking about politics and we'll get back into history, since that's what this class is about, I guess. So we just talked about ancient Egypt last week and Mesopotamia before that. Two fascinating and cool ancient civilizations. I wish we could go more into them. I could probably make a world history class specifically about either one of those ancient societies, and we could go on for years. There's so much to learn. But unfortunately, we don't have all the time, so we're going to keep rushing along. So we're moving on to ancient China today. China. So with no further ado, we will get started. I'm going to post guided notes, so you guys can either do the notes along with the video or just look at the slides and fill out the notes, whatever. It's online. I can't stop you. So you could, I guess, just read them and do the notes, but I'm going to make the videos anyways for those of you who like that kind of stuff. So we will begin screen sharing now. Ancient China and the Yellow River Valley. So, laser pointer. So this is old China, or new China, and this is ancient China. So civilization grows along the Huanghe River. It's called the Jiangxi River, the Yangtze River, Huanghe, and Yangtze. So these are the two river valleys. But the Huanghe is the yellow river. Fine soil carried in the river called less gives it a yellow color. So that's why it's called the Yellow River, because these very fine soil particles that go down it. It's erosion, essentially. The ancient Chinese built massive dikes to keep the river from overflowing. A dike is just a big pile of earth next to the river. It's like a big earth wall. And so the river can rise and fall without splashing over top of the dikes. They have them all over. It's the dikes and dams system is often what they'll call it. So that says geography. It's kind of like Chinese style. I don't know what the font's about. So the Chinese geography, it's isolated by natural barriers. They have deserts to the north and the south and mountains. Lots of mountains in China. So they were kind of isolated. Because they were so isolated, it led to the belief that the Chinese people believed that they were the only source of civilization, They didn't do much trading with Mesopotamia and Egypt and the Indus River Valley because they were so isolated, so far east. They had very little contact with traders and invaders, as I just said. It was mostly because it was hard to get across the mountains and the deserts. We'll find out that's a story with the Indus River Valley as well. Civilization was they were sort of stuck by geography. So this is really where Shang dynasty existed. This is ancient China, this little area right here. Much, much smaller than modern China. Now that's the Huanghe River right there. Nice and kind of looks a little bit yellow. It's like a little bit brownish. Shang, China. That's a piece of pottery from there. It's a piece of artwork. So this would have been 1,650 years before Christ, or before the Common Era, and 10,046 years to 10,046 years before the Common Era. So 1,000 years, so 3,000 years ago, these guys were around. Dynasties ruled by families, much like modern kind of monarchy type systems or feudal systems. The emperor ruled a small area, and then his family members, like his cousins and his aunts and uncles and second cousins and third cousins and stuff, would own the rest of the country. So it was kind of like it's like a mob situation where the family ran the whole thing. Shang Di was the supreme deity, their god. The gods wouldn't, it was no use praying to gods in China, in ancient China, because the gods didn't care about you. So instead they worshiped their ancestors. You would ask your grandparents or maybe if you had a great uncle who was an amazing character who had done amazing feats, you would build a shrine to him in your house and you would ask for his blessings on things. And he would help you from the afterlife is the idea. The yin and yang symbol comes from this ancient civilization. It's supposed to represent the balance of two forces. This is still a really popular thing you'll see around America all the time. They represent different things. In European society, we'll draw female shapes as circles and male shapes as squares, usually. Where in Chinese society, it's not quite that way. Geometry is quite interesting, how ancient geometry, especially, they genderize shapes and things like that. It was fascinating. Chinese writing. They would write on bones. I think this is a bone fragment. They would carve on them. Over 1,000 pictographs and ideograph characters. So they have a picture-based writing system. Not super unfamiliar to the hieroglyphs we studied in the past, but different. It's quite its own. So Chinese have a fascinating language that's quite separate than most other ones. They go up and down instead of left to right like we do. It's now called calligraphy. It's a form of art, drawing Chinese characters in a really beautiful way. I have a friend who does calligraphy in sand. She's pretty cool. She's Vietnamese, not Chinese. A single writing system helped unite China. They all write, whether you're in North China, South China, East or West, you all write the same. That's why there's thousands of pictures, because they would take in old pictures. So the social structure of China, the royal family and the nobles control society. Artisans and merchants represent the middle class. So they fill up the middle. So it's much like the other societies. Peasants are the bottom. They form up the vast majority of the population. They're the farmers. They're the most important ones. And then people who have more specialized tasks usually rise above them in the social order. Autonomy. So what kind of coins? They use copper coins. They traded with each other a lot. And This was huge for China. Ancient China was the only place that could develop silk. Eventually, the Middle East got a hold of silk technology, I guess you could call it. They found out that silkworms, you can weave silk from the silkworms, but it took them thousands of years. So the Chinese had it first, and it was a really closely held secret. Like, they would kill you if you try to steal, if you try to tell people how silk was created. The Chinese would kill you. So silk becomes a very valuable export. It made China super rich. The dynastic title, I almost said style. When things go bad, ruling dynasties are overthrown because they run on this thing called the mandate of heaven. And if things are going wrong, then obviously heaven is disapproving of you. And if the emperor is in control and there's lots of floods and lots of people die because of the floods and the crops get ruined and it leads to a famine, then they don't blame the gods like other societies would do. They would blame the emperor because the emperor has the mandate of heaven. And obviously God was displeased with the emperor if things were going wrong. So they needed a new emperor. So they would overthrow him and then they would replace him with a new one. And so that's what happened to the Shang and the Zhou. I don't really know how to speak Chinese, but we'll call them the Zhou dynasty, the Zhao dynasty. Replaced the Zhang in 1046. So the Zhao, they were a little bit bigger than the Shang were. They had this little spot up here. I don't know what that's about, why it wasn't connected. The longest ruling dynasty in Chinese history, 790 years. That's amazingly long time for one family to run a kingdom. Confucianism, which is, some people call it a religion, but it's not. It's more like a philosophy. Confucianism is really popular in China, and so is Taoism. One of them has to do with being a good person, and the other one has to do with being a good member of society. I don't know which one's which. In China, they don't traditionally have, what we would consider, or at least ancient China, they didn't have what we would consider a religion, because they didn't really think praying to the gods mattered. So it was a religion, I guess, but it wasn't set up in the same format as the other societies. This one ends with the Warring States period. If any of you have ever played Dynasty Warriors games, that's what it's about, the War of the Three Kingdoms. It's this really famous epic book from ancient China about the Warring States period. So the exit ticket. How did the concept of the mandate of heaven help each new dynasty? Well, if the new dynasty came into power, then it would mean that God was pleased with them and they would have the mandate of heaven with them and they could carry out their plans. As things started to go wrong, then they would lose the mandate of heaven, which would mean that they would fall apart, and then the next new dynasty would get the mandate of heaven, and then that would help them take over power. So that's about it for today. We'll go deeper into China. Tomorrow we'll probably do a big reading about it, and then, or not a big reading, but a reading about it, and then we'll probably watch like a video or something and wrap it up. All right, rock on. Have a good day, guys.